Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we are going to have a little chat about things to keep in mind when you first start your journey into the great hobby of Warhammer 40k. Now, a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about can be applied to like any and all other systems effectively, but given the channel, we're going to focus primarily on Warhammer 40,000. But it is just general stuff that can apply to pretty much everything. And this is stuff that I'm kind of bringing up because a regular occurrence for me is getting messages from people who are planning to start 40k or are just about to start 40k, have ordered their first 40k stuff, have a friend who wants to get into 40k but they're not sure kind of how to recommend them to get started. And this is just, I guess, blanket advice from me, which, you know, you can take it or leave it, but this is just suggestions that I've found have worked for other people in the past, as to how to get started in this whole thing, because it can be a bit intimidating, it can be a bit much to take in. I mean, 40k is a huge, like, it's a huge, colossal thing. You've got vast amounts of lore, you've got countless stories, you've got a serious number of books that you need to read through to get started, and I think it's easy to become overwhelmed and it's easy to become focused on things that are actually detrimental to getting you invested in the hobby. So, the first thing that we'll talk about is picking your army, because that, I think, is the most important first step for pretty much everyone. And it depends very much on the kind of person you are as to what army you will pick and how you will choose it. But my advice that I've always given over however many years of being involved in 40k is, when you very first start out, don't aim for the thing that you think will be the absolute best. Don't look at it from the point of view of, okay, well, straight off the bat, I want the strongest thing. If you're someone who is heavily invested in the idea of tournaments, of competitions, of competitive play, if your driving focus behind, you know, your various hobbies is that you want to be in a position to essentially win every game, go to every tournament, then that's a valid way to start out. Doing your research and finding out which force is doing well currently, which force has got the strongest composition, all of that stuff. Like, there's countless videos on YouTube that will tell you how to do that. I'll link a few channels in the description down below, actually, so you can have a look at a few channels that are like that. If you are that person, then by all means, go for that, because your driving force is not necessarily the same as, like, the more casual player. If you're looking into the hobby as just something to do as a whole, like the modelling, the painting, the playing as one big thing, then I think the best advice I can give for that is that you pick the army that interests you the most. It might not necessarily be the strongest force, it might not be the most competitive force, but in a simple way to properly invest yourself straight away is to pick something you really like the look of. It's the same with actually playing guitar in a weird way. I'm using this as an example because, as you can see, I've got a few over there. A lot of kids say they want to start learning guitar, and what they mean is they want to start learning electric guitar, but their parents go, no, you have to play acoustic guitar first. They get the kid an acoustic guitar, the kid cannot play Metallica on an acoustic guitar, and they lose interest in the guitar. If they'd got the electric guitar to begin with, the chances are they would continue to be interested and they would continue to be invested because they're actually doing the thing that they want to do. The same applies to armies when you're first starting in 40k. If you are looking at this big range of armies and you go, okay, I really like the look of Dark Eldar, they look amazing, I love the aesthetic of them, I like the idea of this fast-moving raider force, but everyone says Space Marines are best to start with, so I'll do that instead. You're already creating a block there for yourself. You're already creating a stumbling block whereby instead of getting the thing that you really like the look of and think you would enjoy, you've pushed it to the side in favour of something that hasn't grabbed you, that hasn't got that kind of inspirational feel to it, and that's not a good way to get invested because you're not going to enjoy that as much. Now, when it comes to things like learning to paint, it could be argued, go for something simple. To start out with, go for something simple. And again, that's something that I think is applicable and can be true. But there are those who don't want to paint something simple, even to start with. They want to challenge themselves. They want to see what they can do. That being said, even if you did decide, say, for Dark Eldar as your first force, which, if that is the force that looks most interesting to you, that is the one you should go for, there are ways to practice without necessarily trashing your first ever kit of Cowbelites or whatever you've grabbed for the first time, even if you've grabbed like a start collecting box. Games Workshop especially provide smaller packs of miniatures, essentially for practice use. I mean, yeah, you can use them to expand your army, but the vast majority of people that I've spoken to aren't grabbing a pack of like 2 Marines so that they can bolster their tactical squad by 2. They're properly testing out paint schemes. You can still do that. There's still ways to practice painting before you get to your, in the case of Dark Eldar especially, quite small, detailed force. Don't let the idea of it being difficult to paint put you off, because you can still practice without necessarily having to, go through the models you've already bought. Another good way around that is to go to like eBay and get rescue models. Find models that have been not treated quite as well as they could have been in a past life, and strip them down, get the paint off them. There's, again, loads of techniques for doing it. I'll link a few in the description. And you can use those to practice on before you start your army proper. The important thing is that when you do start that army, it's the one that you want to start. It's the one that you are most invested in. It's the one that you're most interested in. That's the best way to guarantee that you will be immediately, actually enjoying what you're doing. No one wants to sit there and look at a project and go, I didn't actually want this, but I need to finish it now. That's a terrible way to get yourself going for something as like time intensive as 40k can be. It's much better to look at something a little bit daunting and go, okay, this is going to be difficult, but I really like these guys, and so this is what I want to do. Another thing is when you first start playing, assuming you do go that far, I mean, there are those who just want to build and paint, and that's fine. If that's all you're going for, then to be honest, a lot of the steps are kind of removed for you, which is very helpful. When it comes to playing, do not go in with the expectation of winning your first match, and I would also suggest don't go in with the expectation of someone going completely easy on you because you are a beginner. Some people will do that. Some people will sit there and go, oh, this is your first game? Alright, cool. I shall relax. I shall not smash the shit out of you. You also get those who kind of go, okay, well, you need to be jumped in, and so I'm going to absolutely annihilate your army and table you in 2 turns, and that'll be that. For the most part, when you come to having your first game, the chances are you'll be having it with a friend. You'll be having it with someone who has already played, who will show you the ropes. If you are having it with a stranger, if you're having your first fight with someone that you've never met before, most people in this hobby are not going to sit there and go, oh, I'm not playing with someone new. Because this is an opportunity to actually get someone into playing the game properly. There's an opportunity to get someone into the hobby to increase the investment that they currently have with their project. Most people will show you the ropes. They will talk you through what's happening. The stress and worry of going to someone new and going, hi, this is my first game, should be offset with the idea that they once had a first game as well. No one came out of the womb playing Warhammer 40k, and to be honest, there are very few people, in my experience anyway, who, when faced with a new player, will go, oh god, just learn to play. Well, you kind of have to play to learn to play. There are ways to prepare for that, of course. Things like battle reports are a very good way for learning how to play the game before you actually get there. And again, I'll link a couple of channels in the description so you can see people playing in action. But try not to let the idea of playing against a stranger for the first time totally shut you down, because for the most part, people are accepting and they are genuinely happy to see more people playing the game. There is an idea of elitism, I think, in this hobby, and it's not something that is hugely backed up by people playing in the real world, if that makes sense. When it comes to expanding your force, when you've got your first start collecting box, when you've got your first 10 guys, don't go overboard. Don't go mental. Don't go spending hundreds of quid on or dollars or whatever your local currency is, euros, whatever. Don't go spending a shed load on a massive army. If there is a way to guarantee you becoming disinterested and frustrated, it is to build up a vast collection of unpainted, unmade models. Something that happens very, very frequently, and something that I get contacted a lot about, is people who have started the hobby and they've gone, I wanted to start, I've been watching the videos for ages, I've seen other people play, I wanted to go for it. So I went out and I bought 2,000 points worth of Space Marines, and now I just don't want to touch them. Don't do that. Absolutely do not do that. To be honest, I reckon a start collecting box from Games Workshop is the most that you should be grabbing if you are starting this for the first time. If you are an incredibly productive person, if you have the free time to smash out a start collecting box, even as a beginner painter, in like 2 weeks, then maybe get another box of something. Just one thing, not 2 things, not 3 things. Don't add 1 box to the cart and go, well, I'll finish those quickly, I'll get 2 more. That is the path to ruin. That is the path to having a cupboard full of grey plastic still in the box that you will just grow to hate. It takes a very, very particular kind of person to properly hoard models and not get like disenfranchised, disinterested, demoralised by just the sheer weight of unused plastic sitting in their room. Start collecting boxes are a great start. If you want to expand on that, then by all means, grab another set of troops. Grab a unit that you like the look of. That's another thing as well. That's, I think, one of the most important things. If you want a functional army, then by all means, get a start collecting box. You will have a functional army. If you want to test the waters, if you want to give painting a try, if you want to see whether the collecting side of it is for you, whether you have the patience, the effort, the energy for just that side of the hobby, then maybe don't start with a start collecting box. Maybe start with just a unit you like the look of. Now, this can sometimes lead to getting a model or a unit that is a bit complicated to paint, that perhaps you might look at and go, I don't know if I've actually got the skill for this. But it can also lead you to become more invested. It can also be that stepping stone whereby you're not quite sure whether to take the plunge. You don't spend the money on a start collecting box because there can be quite a lot in them. It can be a bit daunting, even though they're not like big forces by 40k standards. It's still a fair amount of stuff to put together and paint. You might find that buying just a single character is the way forward, that you need something to test the waters with. Or those smaller packs that Games Workshop sell that I've mentioned before, that's another way to test the waters, see whether you want to actually invest in the hobby or not. If you have started with a start collecting box though, take that force. If you can have a game against someone with that, that's a great start. For the most part, people can trim their lists, especially if you've got friends who've got you into it. If there's people around you, if there's like an official Games Workshop store or like an FLGS line around, then there will be people there who will most likely be happy to trim their list down a little bit so that they can, I say a little bit, a fair bit, so that you can test out your force once it's painted. And from that point on, you are at risk of just piling work onto yourself. Take a measured approach. Instead of getting a whole bunch of stuff and trying to expand massively straight off the bat, take it slow and steady, because people who have been playing 40k for decades, people who've been playing for years and years, people who, I mean, in my case, talk about this hobby literally every day, we can get burnt out easily by having too much stuff going on, by having too many unpainted models, by having too much stuff just piled up. It happens to not just the best of us, it happens to literally everybody. I think pretty much everyone at some point looks at a pile of boxes that is full of an army that they, like 2 months ago, really wanted to put together and paint, and now just don't. Because it's too much. There's too much stuff, there's too much to put together, there's too much to paint, don't have the effort, don't have the energy, can't be bothered, there's so many other things that need to be done, and it just sits there, brooding at you, making you feel bad. In fact, we did talk about like the motivation to paint last week, which, again, I'll link the description is going to be full of a bajillion links, but I'll try and make it somewhat navigable for you. So, take it slow and steady. Don't just splash out a load of cash on thousands of points, because that is a great way to get yourself overwhelmed and make it so that you're just not feeling it. Something that happens to everyone else, people who have been doing this for God knows how many years. It can very easily happen to you. Now, when it comes to things like colour schemes for your sensibly sized force, because you didn't buy 2,000 points worth of Dark Eldar, you bought the Star Collecting box and maybe rescued a couple of miniatures off eBay as a tester. As you go into the hobby and as you collect more and paint more and model more, you will find that your paint collection grows and grows and grows. Because your technique will change, the colours that you want to use will change, the overall approach that you take to how you paint will change. When you first start out though, option paralysis when it comes to models is very much a thing. Option paralysis when it comes to paints is also very much a thing. It is so easy to say, well, I've got the cash, why don't I just buy the massive bundle of paints? I'll get the big, look, I'd have so many options, so much choice. Whatever colour I want to paint them, I'll be able to do that. If you do that before you've decided on a colour scheme for your guys, the chances are you may well never decide on a colour scheme for your guys, because you have every colour under the sun at your disposal, and which one do you use? Which do I go for? Do I go for that shade of yellow or that shade of yellow? Do I go for that orange or that orange? I mean, if I'm going to do them black, do I want the edges blue or do I want them red? If I'm doing highlights in the hair, do I want to do that particular shade of it? Don't even get yourself started in that. For your first army, for your first experience painting a full force, pick a simple colour scheme, pick, a limited selection of paints and washes, get some washes because washes are liquid talent, and stick to them. Now, as you get further along, you will say to yourself, I think I could make that a bit smoother if I used another colour in between. Rather than just going the hard cut from black to white, if I put a bit of grey in there, that would improve that a lot, I think. I'll give that a go. At that point, buy a grey of some kind. If you then look at, say you've done all the top knots in a nice flowing red, but it's just plain red, you've used a wash, you've got a nice bit of shade in there, but you want to do a bit of a highlight. All you've got is white. What you actually want is a lighter red to highlight. At that point, then you buy the lighter red. Paint collections, for me, are one of those things where I've always found that the best way to do it is to build it up slowly. To not just go out and buy everything at once, because it's exactly the same thing as happens with an army. And there is also the fact that at the start, you're just not going to use them all, is the plain fact of it. You're just not going to use all of those paints. You're not going to open all of those lids. And the thing is, you might well open one of them and go, okay, well, I'll give this a try. You find it doesn't work. You close it again. You don't seal it properly. That paint is now ruined, because if you don't touch it again for the next 2 months, it will be dry as hell and it will be completely unusable. Buy the things you need, not necessarily the things that you want. There's no need to purchase every paint under the sun, because when you first start painting, you simply don't need every paint under the sun. You just need the ones relevant to your colour scheme, and that's it. Now, you might find when it comes to doing basing, you're like, okay, well, I want to try some fancy colour scheme on the bases. Decide the colour scheme and expand the paint collection to accommodate the bases. Don't just grab everything at once, because the same thing can happen as happens if you buy an entire army at once, like 2,000 points worth. You either don't use it, it sits there unused, you feel like you've wasted your money, you don't have the motivation to use it, you can't find a reason to use it, and it's like, well, what have I got this for? Oh, nothing. Whereas when you build up slowly, you end up with everything you need, and if you need something else, you just grab it when you need it. You don't need to have it there on the off chance that maybe in 6 months' time you will use that particular shade of orange, because you may never actually use that particular shade of orange, and it could have been spent on the paint you actually did need. Now, brushes, when it comes to painting, quite an important thing to think about. It depends on, I think, your commitment. It depends on whether you are prepared to really go for it. If you are middling, if you're like, I'll give it a try, I'm not too fussed, I'll see how I like it, then getting a cheaper set of brushes is not a bad call. They won't last as long, and the quality will be worse, because cheaper generally does mean worse. But if you're not entirely sure whether that side of the hobby is for you, whether you're going to really get into it, or whether you're just going to, blast out armies, get them on the tabletop, and playing is where you're going to get your enjoyment, then cheaper is probably not a bad option. And given how cheap some brushes are, even if they're not great at all, they've cost so little that you haven't really lost anything, so to speak. For anyone else who is actually looking at probably getting into painting as a significant part of the hobby, as something that they want to really become skilled at and really develop, I wouldn't go for like high price brushes straight away, like really high quality stuff straight away. Like middling is probably just as good. You can splash out loads on really nice brushes, but there is a good chance that even with the best of intentions, when you first start painting, you're going to mistreat them. And it won't be like a malicious thing of, I just don't give a shit about my brushes. You'll forget, is all it boils down to. You'll be in the middle of something, you'll be painting a model, something will come up, You will forget to give the brush a wash, you will leave a bunch of paint on the end, and the next time you come back to it, you will find that it's not in a good condition. You've got to do some real work to get it back in order. You will find that you put them down in silly ways, and so you end up bending the bristles. You will find that you leave one of them in the mug that you've been using to wash them off, and they will be bent at like right angle because they've sat in that water for like over the weekend when you went out and you just didn't think about it. It happens. It happens to literally everyone, including me. I mean, I don't know how many brushes I've wrecked by just not thinking to wash them afterwards. I mean, I had to chuck a dry brush in the bin the other day because I genuinely forgot to clean it so many times that it just ended up with a ball of paint inside it that was completely unremovable. It was like iron, that thing. I mean, I've only been painting models since I don't want to think how long now. It happens to everyone. If you've got really high quality stuff when you first start out, though, the chances are you'll make that mistake more often and you will trash your really nice brushes more frequently. Whereas, cheap ones might not be for you. They might not be good enough for you. You might decide that you want something a bit more expensive, that you're going to put the time into painting to make it worth it, at which point getting something that's more middling is a decent idea. You need to try and remember to take care of them. Obviously, don't just trash them because you can't be bothered, but it's something that can happen, and it's less of a gut punch when you didn't pay like 50 quid for 4 brushes when you do find that you've left one of them in the pot overnight and it's gone all like mangly and weird. So again, it's a moderation thing. That's something where some people can genuinely just... I've seen someone who never painted before pick up a brush, start using it, and went, oh, this is crap. This is like, is this cheap? And I had to go, yeah, that is cheap. And some people can tell, some people can't, some people don't care. It just depends on how much of an investment you're making into the painting side of things, I think. I think for the most part, that is pretty much it. Essentially, it comes down to moderation. It comes down to moderation, knowing what you want to get out of it, and being sensible about the stuff that you buy. It's all stuff that sounds like common sense, but it's so easy to get overexcited, and it's so easy to just go, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to buy that Eldar Force, and then you end up with 2,500 points of just boxes that you never put together. You've bought a massive crate of paint, and you find that you have opened 4 of them and just don't use the rest, and it's totally pointless. You go out and you buy your what are they? The Artist Opus series or something? One of the more pricier ones. You buy those brushes and then find that, oh god damn it, I've left it literally left it sticking out of a paint pot for 3 days. Now the paint pot's dry, the brush is dried in it, and it's totally unsalvageable. What the hell am I going to do? Moderation in all things is not a bad call. So that is the kind of thing that I would suggest you keep in mind when you start playing Warhammer 40,000, and I hope some of that has been useful to someone. Even just one person is fine. And yeah, I think that'll just about do it. Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to click all of the things. I'm going to do something I don't usually do, and I'm probably going to do this a little bit more. I'll keep it to the end of the video. But as you are probably aware, the Adpocalypse 4.9, 5.2, how many Adpocalypse are we on now? I don't know. Ad revenue is not great on YouTube. This does take time. It does take effort and energy and editing and uploading and all kinds of faffy nonsense. If you would like to support the channel, there is a link to my Patreon in the description down below. You can click it if you like. There is also an affiliate link to Element Games. You don't spend anything extra, you just buy 40k stuff, and I get something for that. It's just a thing of saying, hey, he sent me, give him something for it. So that is also an option if you would like to do that. If you don't want to, then don't. It's also fine. Do what you like. I'm literally not your boss. I'm no one's boss, except myself, which is a terrible idea. Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video, subscribe, all of that stuff. Click it if you like, don't click it if you don't want to, and I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.